Welcome to your Artsy Girl podcast. I am your host, Christina Carrere. This is a podcast about art, poetry, writing, and anything about creativity. Sit back, relax, and get your dose of brain food to get your creative juices flowing. Hello, welcome to episode 50. Yes, it's been quite a while here at your artsygirlpodcast.com. We have a unique situation that this global community has been dealing with, and that's COVID-19. So I have been out of commission for a few weeks, but I am back. I'm going to try to keep a regular schedule, but it's not guaranteed. So interviews might be spaced out a little bit longer in between due to the circumstances. But anyway, I had set up my home computing for telecommuting. So hopefully this looks like it's going to fare well. And I'm glad to be back. And I have someone, awesome poet, to introduce to you today. He had been featured before in my earlier episodes. It was a very hard interview to listen to because it was recorded in a very busy cafe. But anyway, this recording is much better, and we have a great announcement. And his name is Tony Robles. He's considered the people's poet, an author of the poetry collections Cool Don't Live Here No More, A Letter to San Francisco, and Fingerprints of a Hunger Strike. Was named the Carl Sandburg Writer-In-Residence for 2020, where he will work on his novel Fillmore Flip, based on his family in San Francisco's Fillmore district. Robles says, "People's lives don't revolve around my books and writing, but my writing is focused on and revolves around the lives of the people." Before I go on to his interview, I'd like to also put a note and a call out. If you are an artist, a writer, or even a musician who has an interesting story and a body of work to share, please reach out to me and send me your bio, your black and white photo and samples, work samples, to yourartsygirl@gmail.com. Please spread the word. Still looking out for people to feature. And I know there's a gazillion of you all out there. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and spread love and light, poetry, music, art in these trying times, to say the least. May you all keep creating despite it all. Everyone, please welcome my next featured guest, Tony Robles. Hi, Tony. Nice to talk to you again.
Yes.
How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing fine. It's good to talk to you.
Well, it's been a year since I've last recorded with you, approximately April 5th, 2019. So a lot has happened since. I remember talking to you before you left to do the Al Robles Express to the mountainside of the Philippines. Can you just go ahead and explain that a little bit to kind of like refresh the audience what that entailed?
Al Robles Express was a film that was in honor of my uncle, the late poet Al Robles, who was very prominent in the Asian American, Filipino American literary scene or literary movement. He was a writer. He was a historian. He documented the lives of the early Filipino manongs, or the immigrants to this country, the ones that were involved in labor, who contributed a great deal in shaping the labor movement on the West Coast and establishing the Filipino community in this country. And his poetry was informed by them. He died back in 2009, and with that, his legacy as a community organizer was a place called the International Hotel in San Francisco. That was a big fight for tenant rights, for housing rights, because we believe that housing is a human right, that it shouldn't be commodified. And he fought to get the International Hotel built. International Hotel was kind of the heart or nerve center of the Filipino community in San Francisco historically in the Manilatown neighborhood. And as the financial sector of the city expanded in the downtown area, Manilatown shrunk and shrunk, and until the last vestige of the neighborhood was the International Hotel. Mm-hmm. And back in the mid 70s, there was an effort to evict the senior manongs from that hotel, which they were able to fight off for a number of years. And until 1977, August 4th, actually, 1977, when a lot of those elders were forcibly evicted. So, he documented the lives of the people that were in the International Hotel, which were basically a lot of the early manongs, the early Filipino immigrants to this country. So he was a very important figure. So, fast forward to 2019, where Al Robles Express was a film that, took three of his best friends, myself, and a younger activist to the Philippines, to Kalinga, because that was so much at the heart of his writing. He wrote a lot about our indigenous selves, and we were in honor of him because he'd never been to the Philippines. He was in San Francisco, so if you read any of his work, it was so centered in that and the parallels between our struggles in the United States and the struggle for dignity and the struggle for land in the Philippines. So it all kind of went hand in hand. And yeah, it was called the Al Robles Express. It was a film, and it was finished, and it's been making its way around the country. So
right, I met you.
Yeah.
I met you at the Philam Book Fest in October of 2019, and unfortunately, I didn't make that screening, but it showed there as well. And yeah, it's going around, and it's still circulating, correct?
That's correct. It's been screened in universities, so we're trying to keep his memory alive. In fact, there was a reissue of his book of poems. Actually, he had a book of poetry that came out in 1996 called "Rappin' with 10,000 Carabaos."
Yes, I saw that you posted that on Facebook. Yep.
Yeah. So in commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the Asian Studies Department or the Asian American Studies Department at UCLA, they reissued the book with some updated work. They put an essay and a couple of other new poems in the book. So that's something that's available. We're going to have a book launch probably sometime later on in the year, depending on how things go with
that's correct.
Everything.
Yes. Well, let's go ahead and talk about what's going on in today's current affairs. We are going through this current pandemic and COVID-19. So it is actually all across the world. And I'm just recording this for, say, future's sake, because it is something that's very integral in our lives right now.
Yes.
And as writers and artists, it's going to affect us, I think, on how we perceive our art and how we communicate, express. So can you, I don't know, this is just, how does it affect you now as far as, your writing and everything?
Yeah, that's a good question, because this thing it's ballooning. You hear the bad news every day, and you hear reports of events being canceled. Down here in North Carolina, I've only been here about 7 months, and the governor just declared a state of emergency down here. Mm-hmm. There's 7 cases, from what I understand, of COVID-19. Because of the response and the lack of testing kits, and there's this distinction that I was reading about between the official cases and the real cases, that the real cases are a lot higher, and that this is just the beginning, that this is really gonna explode in the coming weeks and months.
Yeah.
So I was just I was thinking about it, I mean, how this is impacting our lives. We're seeing more anti-Asian violence. That's overt Asian violence. That's very ugly.
Yes.
Um, I find myself, down here, the Asian community or the Asian American community down here in North Carolina isn't that big,
Right.
not like in California. And, I work in a supermarket, and, and I come across a lot of people, and I see Asian folks, and I find myself, saying to myself, okay, if you see an Asian person, don't look at them. Don't look. Because, they must be thinking, that people are watching them,
Right.
looking at them, thinking, "Oh, it's because of you."
Yeah.
And it's those little micro type of things, that those everyday occurrences, and that happen in everyday life. Right?
Yeah, it's the stigma. My mom also said, I don't know how it came up, but it was about, the, where we get our manicure. And she says, don't you think they're afraid too of, catching it themselves? People are not going there because they're afraid that they're going to catch it there because they're going to be spreading it. So, it's interesting. My mom, who's Filipino, full-blooded, remind us all that they are also, as an Asian community, are deathly afraid too.
Yeah, and the just the vitriol and a lot of that I'm seeing is,
well, particularly I'm afraid. Well, just to be frank, you're technically in the South, so that is even more amplified, I think, too.
Yeah, and then you see things that are kind of straight, that then, like I was at work the other day, I work at a deli counter, and a guy with a MAGA hat is coming, he's there.
Wow.
With a MAGA hat with his Asian girlfriend.
Get out of here.
No, and he's ordering fried chicken, right? And I work at the fried chicken counter, right?
It's interesting because I do have Asian, Filipino American cousins that are, half Filipino, but they are MAGA. I don't get it. It's
really strange. I think that has to do with white supremacy and white privilege. That you can. There's somehow, with that, there's a sense of security that cancels out everything else, even things that make sense, that.
And it's an identity issue also, I think,
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so weird.
Yeah. It's like a MAGA hat. You have a piece of John Wayne with you, right? and that cancels out everything. Everything is okay. Even if you can be messed up, but as long as you have that hat on, you have a piece of white supremacy, and you're fine.
Oh my goodness!
There might be even a part of you, even that says, with white supremacy in the MAGA hat, that there's such a sense of security in that, which is not really secure at all. But there might be such a sense of security in that's so far out there that you might even feel like that you might even be immune to getting COVID-19. That might even sound. I mean, that sounds weird, doesn't it?
Well, if you believe in the president right now, yeah, I guess you would think so. Mm-hmm.
So, so I think it's going to impact our art. I mean, I think the best thing that can happen is that we look inward. We look in the community. I mean, you already have people that are posting. You have people that are posting the most vile things, right? But then you also have people that are posting things like, hey, to the people that have bought all the toilet paper and all the water and everything off the shelves, did you not think that the most vulnerable, the seniors, need to get this stuff too? And they may not be able to make it to the market to buy the things that they need.
Yes.
And, causing us maybe to look inward and look more in terms of community and to, just try to maybe take a step back and really kind of look at things.
It's not surprising that you have, inherited your uncle's perspective as being a activist in the community, no matter where you go, because you are active in your community, making great friends already, and also, but before I make your latest announcement, I just want to also say that not only you're a poet, but you also have published a few children's books.
Those were the children's books actually were the first things that were published. You know, my uncle back in 1973 or 74 was part of a program called the CETA program. It was CETA, CETA. And it was funded by the federal government. It was basically an art program that brought community artists into the schools. And from that, he published through a publisher called Children's Book Press out of San Francisco. He published a book called Looking for Ifugao Mountain, which was a children's book. And it was Tagalog and English, right? And it was actually featured in the Al Robles Express movie, but Children's Book Press at the time saw that there was a void of, children's books that were, geared toward and written for communities of color. So, his book fit in with that. That being said, fast forward 25 or so years later, I'm on a bus with him in San Francisco, and I had just told him about an idea for a children's book that I had because my son had been born. And I wanted to give something to my son that would tell him, who he was, and give him some kind of an idea of what his identity is. And as luck would have it, the publisher of Children's Book Press happened to be on that bus.
Wow.
Got into a conversation. My uncle said, hey, Harriet. Her name was Harriet Romer. She was the founder of Children's Book Press. And my uncle said, hey, tell Harriet that goofy story that you were telling me. So I told it to her, and she says, well, look, why don't you come in and we'll talk more about it, come to our office. So I went to the office and I told her about it. I hadn't written anything. I'd never written a children's story or anything. And I went in and I basically just gave her a synopsis, right? I wrote a synopsis, and then I left, and then we never talked about it again. It was kind of just fizzled. And then Harriet then resigned from her position and was replaced by another editor. And a year later, I get a letter in the mail saying, hey, I found the papers and the little sketches and drawings for this story. I'd like to reopen the conversation.
Wow.
So that's how it happened.
Crazy.
That's how it happened. I went to see her. She says, well, look, write the story and let's take it from there. And then at that point, I was kind of scared to death because I'd never written a children's story. And I asked my uncle, so, well, God, what do I do? He says, well, write it as a poem. Which is what I did. It took a while. And I remember when I did it, I was struggling with it, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to ruin this. It's not going to happen.
Which book is this one?
La Casa and the Manila Town Fish.
Wow.
And I said, you know what, I'm going to ruin it. It's not going to happen. But then it all came. One morning I was laying in my bed. I remember I was eating French bread and I was writing it, and I was getting French bread crumbs all on the sheets, and I've nailed it. I in one shot, boom, I wrote it.
Yep.
Of course,
that's great.
We edited and tweaked it here and there.
And it's a great children's book. It really is. Nice graphics and everything. So the audience has to check it out for real because it is really cool.
That came from, Carl Angel was the artist, and he was very wonderful. He did a fantastic job on both of the children's books. But when my son Lacasse was born, he had this cowlick sticking up, right, his hair in the back, and it reminded me of the fin of a fish, and that's how I got that idea about the fish. And that character in your book he had a cowlick, didn't he? Lacasse had the cowlick. Yeah.
Yes.
And then the fish had the fin. So there was one of the pictures is Lacasse looking in the fish tank.
Yes.
And the fish is looking back at him, and you see the cowlick on Lacasse's head, and you see the fin of the fish. So it was like a mirror, right? They were both looking at each other.
Yes, I remember. Because you read it at the book fest. It was great. It was great.
That's always a lot of fun, those.
Yeah, it was great. Well, flash forward to now. I know you published quite a bit also in between, but since moving to North Carolina, and it's Hendersonville right now, right?
Yes, it's in western North Carolina. Hendersonville is about maybe 30 to 40 minutes away from Asheville. Yeah.
So you have just been awarded the Carl Sandburg Writer-In-Residence, and I just want to congratulate you on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
I did some research on that, and it's really cool. You get to stay in his old residency, and now they made it into a writer's residency, and you get to stow away for 2 months and write.
Yeah, it's actually a month. It starts on March the 18th, and it runs through, I think, March the 8th. So I'll be staying in an A-frame kind of green house, and it's actually the farm. It's the farmhouse, and they might actually have me out there milking goats or something. Because Carl Sandburg's wife Paula, she raised goats, championship goats on that property. In fact, they're
goats. What do you mean championships? Like breeding them?
Award-winning goats. Yeah, the prized goats, okay. And it was her idea actually to move there because they were living off of Lake Michigan, and the winters were very severe. So I think in 1945 they moved down to Flat Rock and into the house, which is known as Connemara, which is on an estate, I guess, of about 480 some acres or something like that. And the farmhouse is part of the a part of it. It was Mrs. Sandburg, after the death of Carl Sandburg, that wanted to establish a writing residency, and so they've been doing that for the last 10 years.
Wow.
With up and coming writers. I'm already planning an event. I reached out to the Black History Collective of Henderson County to do a Black History program in July. Crystal Cawley is the head of that collective, and there's a deep, rich history of African Americans in that area. Of course, even on the Sandburg estate, there's a history of enslaved people that had lived there during the time of the Confederacy, who were living in those slave quarters that are still there. And the Sandburg House wants to do more to recognize that. So working with them to bring more attention to that history.
And for people who don't know exactly who Carl Sandburg was, he was an American poet, a biographer, a journalist, and editor, and he won, I guess, 3 Pulitzer Prizes.
Yeah, I think he won a Pulitzer for the biography of Lincoln, and then his collected poems earned him a Pulitzer as well. The interesting thing about him, he was very politicized. Early on, he campaigned for Eugene Debs in Chicago. He was he was a socialist, and I think the image of him of being a saintly old man who was writing poems can be a little bit misleading, because he always wrote from the lens of the working class. His first language at home was Swedish, actually, and in the community that he lived in, it was an immigrant community where, people were speaking many different languages. So there's a lot of things about him and his life that resonate with what's happening now.
So he was an activist too, or some sort, so it's kind of befitting. So
yeah, he wrote about the Chicago race riots. There was a young African American boy who was killed because he was swimming in the wrong place, and that, of course, resonates with the police brutality that's going on right now across the country. It's
great. I mean, the way you've researched his history and how it connects to the present day, and as a writer going into the writers in residence, it's almost like it comes in full circle.
Yes.
And this is the type of legacy that, as writers, we kind of want to pass along to the next generation, as your uncle did.
Yeah, the thing is, with people and their time that they can devote to writing, we put our heart and soul and spirit into writing. And for me, it's about, writing about, the everyday folk, right? The workers and people and people that are struggling, and people that, they inform my writing. But I know that, my writing is not the center of their life. It's not the focal point of their life. They're busy working. They're busy surviving. They're busy. So if I can catch glimpses of, they inform me. My work is not the center and does not revolve around their life, but their lives are the focus of my work.
I noticed that. Yes.
Their lives are the focus of my work, and I don't take advantage of that. I don't take it lightly, and they're the focus of my craft, and it's not the other way around, because those people are busy trying to feed their families and trying to feed their kids. So so it's an honor and a privilege, actually, to
yes.
And if I'm going to take up people's time and try to if I want people to read me, I got to make sure that I'm writing something worth their time and worth reading. So the onus on that is on me.
Mm-hmm. So do you have anything you'd like to share with us? A piece of writing?
Okay, so this is a poem called My Father's Music. And it came from the fact that he had about 1,000 record albums when I was growing up. And I always wanted to play those albums, but he didn't want me touching the records because he didn't want me to get fingerprints on them, right? But I touched them anyway. And it's probably the best thing I ever wrote, but this is called My Father's Music. My father's music percolates and palpitates like hot coffee dreaming, a tap dancer's arrival, hitting throat with the right note, going back deep, unopposed. And my father's music is caught in a kettle whose grease endured screams and flame of gas stove decisions, where curling irons bent notes and contemplated hooks landing on the chin and announcing its verdict on a rippled canvas. My father's music is an empty cup of my favorite things, where soup is made from pain and love is made from rain. My father's music is made in wood. When he would, then wouldn't, then would again, and wood is softer than stone, and wouldn't you know it? My father's music is the chamber of cool, poking into the greenness of the sun's estate of ecstatic, static. My father's music is sky minus rain divided by sun, multiplied by incense in the smoldering pyramid of branches. My father's music is the in-time pantomime of the heaven-hell debate whose defense rests on the 8th day. My father's music floats and glides and slides from head to thigh, and on that other side where up is down and down is up, sticking like flapjacks whose wings lap, lap, lap the tick, tock, oil of greasy time. My father's music skips, bumps, burps, slurps, sizzles on the sunny side of the street. Crackle, pop, bop, pan fried with an egg on top. My father's music.
Wow. It even is more exquisite when you read it out loud.
Well, I do not want to whisper that one because it is very good for you, So.
I wonder how it would sound if you did it in a Filipino accent.
I don't know. It's my father's music. I cannot hear. Turn it up. I cannot hear too good now, but okay, it's good for you.
Have you done stand-up comedy too?
What's that? No, well, a lot of sit-down comedy, okay? a lot of sit down.
Oh my goodness. Wow. So where can people go and learn more about you and your work then?
Well, there's a kind of a website that I have. It's tonyrobles.wordpress.com. And, they can get information. I also have on Facebook, I have a page for my two children's books, La Casa and the Manila Town Fish, and La Casa and the Maki Baka Hotel. I also have Facebook pages for the poetry books, Cool, Don't Live Here No More, A Letter to San Francisco, and the other one is called Fingerprints of a Hunger Strike. So I have pages for them. But tonyrobles.wordpress.com, and you can read all about my capers in the deli section of the supermarket.
Yes, I enjoy reading that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's rife with fried chicken and sliced deli meat.
With real life, rife with real life. Yeah.
Yeah,
See, I'm learning some rhyme.
What's that?
I said I'm learning some rhyme.
Yeah, right.
Well, goodness gracious, I'm so glad I got to catch up with you again. And this time it is clear as a bell. And I'm so proud that now people can really listen to you. And so what's next after this? Anything? So what are you working on during your residency? I'm
working on it's actually a novel. I was selected I was the recipient actually of a grant for literary arts from the San Francisco Art Commission in San Francisco, and my project that I'm going to be working on at the Carl Sandburg House is a novel, and it's called Fillmore Flip. And it's basically kind of a story of my family. It's based on my family living in the Fillmore district, which was a historic, Black, Japanese, Jewish neighborhood, Filipino neighborhood in San Francisco. Depending on what part of the country you're from, you might take offense to the word flip, but on the West Coast, it was never derogatory. As everybody calls it a flip. That's what they call themselves. So, but not all of the Filipino community has the same experience.
Right. So
some might take offense to that name, but that it's a history that needs to be told.
Right.
And it's a history that doesn't get told. So, and I feel like I really need to devote time to it. So, I'm almost through with it, and I'm going to be polishing it up and plugging in some quotes.
Well, I look forward to that.
Quotes, seeing
it on the bookshelf.
Oh yeah.
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 Well, it's been great talking to you and catching up. And you're already making great strides and making your imprint in Henderson, North Carolina. And I wish you luck, the best of luck in all you do and your next venture, okay?
I appreciate it. And you and I are pretty close. You're down in Florida. So we'll definitely connect one of these days. And I appreciate you, having this podcast, and it's great being on again,
And please stay safe out there. I wish you well.
I appreciate you too.
Okay, thank you. Well, everyone, that is it for now. Please tune in next week for my next featured guest. In the meantime, have a productive and creative week. Bye, Tony.
All right now, thanks.